Selling children into slavery, one of the world's most heinous crimes, but a crime that is nonetheless on the rise. Welcome to On the Frontline, where we're homing in on the issue of child trafficking. By its very nature, trafficking is extremely hard to quantify. Conservative estimates put the number of children trafficked globally at 1.2 million, and those who've been sold into slavery at 5.5 million. We know that most victims are girls, forced into the sex trade, begging, work on farms or plantations, domestic work, into adoption or even removal of organs. A recent study suggests that most victims in the EU are trafficked from Bulgaria and Romania. And that's why our reporter, Michelle Santos, went to Bulgaria, where the alarm is being raised over the disturbing practice of selling babies.
Lubomir had a girlfriend who got pregnant. The couple separated before the child was born. He was hoping to see his son, but that proved impossible. Lubomir believes she sold the baby.
Аз не мога да бъда сигурен в нещо.
I can't be sure. It is possible. I know there are people who can find out. I have my theory, but I can't prove it. It is a standard scheme. It is something that happens and that's widely known.
The mother, Victoria as she wants to be called, says she has given the baby to another boyfriend she was seeing at the time. She denies selling her child.
He thinks that I've sold my baby. I would never do such a thing. To sell a human being, it's not in my nature.
Lubomir tried to be recognized as the father of the child. He says the courts turned down his request. According to a lawyer we met, the current family code in Bulgaria has a legal loophole. Greta Ganiva says it doesn't allow the alleged biological father to challenge another man who's registered the child as his.
Potential human traffickers can use this legal gap for their purposes. A foreigner can travel to Bulgaria and register as a child's legal father. He can then leave with the child. It's not a cause of concern for Bulgaria because the baby is no longer in the country. And if the child is not registered elsewhere, then nobody will look for it.
Ultimately, Lubomir's case could turn out to be a family row or an illegal adoption. But it highlights concerns over human trafficking in Bulgaria, where the legal loophole can be exploited to sell babies. According to the Bulgarian Anti-Human Trafficking Agency, poverty is the reason most women decide to sell their babies. The agency says many of them come from the Roma community. They head to Greece to give birth because the law there is less strict.
They give birth in a Greek hospital. Then, because of the system and the legal system in Greece, it's very, how to say, it's free, it's not complicated. So if you give birth, the only paper that the mother receives is just a piece of paper like this, that you have the name of the mother and only the sex of the baby. That's it.
What happens next is unclear, but with tight adoption rules in Europe, it's believed many of these babies are then illegally sold on to couples looking for a child to adopt.
I'm joined on the front line by Rani Hong, UN Gift Special Advisor on Human Trafficking, and Colin Walker, Deputy Director of the UK branch of the NGO ECPAT, a leading rights organisation for children. Rani, tragically, you have an insider's view on child trafficking. Can you briefly tell us your story?
Yes, I was born in southern part of India, and I was kidnapped from my mom and sold into slavery. I was a 7-year-old child, innocent. And what happened is I got trafficked into the other state, and where I did not know the language, I didn't know anyone there, and I couldn't ask for help. My owner had the ownership of me, and I was beating me, so I was beaten, starved, and tortured, all in the will of submitting to another human being. So eventually, with all the abuse that happened to me, I looked like I was near death. But he wanted to make one more profit. So he sold me for international adoption into Canada, Canada into the United States. But I tell you the story today because I represent millions of the little girls that I was, silenced, abandoned, and alone.
And Colin, it's happening in Europe, which is rather shocking, I think, to a lot of people, because people think of Europe as a very civilized, safe place. Why is it happening?
You talk about Europe being kind of seen as a civilized, well-off place. That's actually one of the reasons why people often look to traffic children and adults to this area. I mean, often the profile of people who are vulnerable to trafficking, often from poor countries, lack of access to education, where there's a history of abuse of women and girls, which and a would-be trafficker can come in with false promises of a better life elsewhere, and under those false pretenses remove a child from a country such as India, such as Vietnam, or within the EU, such as Bulgaria, Romania, and move them elsewhere. And often that child will find that they've actually been exposed to some pretty brutal exploitation that in no way matches the promise of a better life that they initially heard.
Okay, and there's a new EU directive which should come into law in April 2013. That's accompanied by an EU strategy. What kind of impact do you think they will have?
The impact, well, we have to wait to see. What kind of measures does it suggest? Well, very useful ones, particularly significantly increasing the minimum terms for traffickers to 5 years for adults or 10 years for children. That we think that is a step in the right direction. Both the directive and the strategy look to facilitate much greater international cooperation within the EU and with external countries to really respond to the transnational nature of this crime. It proposes really welcome initiatives such as trying to prevent countries from prosecuting children who have been forced to participate in criminal activities.
Legislation is one very important factor. It's a case of supply and demand. How else can you stop the demand?
We need to bring public awareness. We need to let the public know the realities of what's happening all around us. So one way to reduce it, again, is public awareness. The other one is we, as consumers, we need to watch the products that we're buying. But the reality is, slavery touches the fabric of our everyday lives. And this is who the consumers are. And we need to be responsible.
I'd like you to listen to this soundbite from Stop the Traffic.
Companies like Nestle, Kraft and Mars source their cocoa from the Ivory Coast, where children have been trafficked. Chocolate for us is just one industry that has child trafficking in its supply chain. We could be looking at the garment industry. We could be looking at our mobile phones.
Rani, are there sanctions in place now that are targeting big industries that are working?
You know, we are seeing a trend of corporations and businesses that are stepping up to the plate. They realize, oh my goodness, I better watch out because I wouldn't want my product to be tainted by slavery. So we are starting to see initiatives such as corporate social responsibility programs within the businesses. We, as consumers, and the audiences listening to us, need to hold businesses accountable so they will not be using child slaves. Because I was one of those child slaves. And it's horrific. It's traumatizing the child. And they have no idea, what's going on. They're just forced to work day in out, 12 to 15-hour days in these factories. I have traveled to different parts of the world, and I've seen some of these factories. And it's devastating.
In terms of the conviction rate of the traffickers who know what they're doing, that's appallingly low. Why are they getting away with this crime?
You're quite right, it is appallingly low. There were a number of factors for this. Some excusable, some are used as excuses. It is a difficult crime to investigate by virtue of its transnational nature. It is often a lot of jurisdictions are reliant on the child to testify against their trafficker as well, given their vulnerability, given the abuse that they've experienced. Actually being able to work with a child to get them into a position in which they can actually provide suitable testimony against those that have abused them is a very, very difficult thing to do. So what we really need to do is work with different jurisdictions across the EU and figure out a way of actually being able to bring prosecutions witnessless prosecutions. We know it works in other areas, such as the cases of domestic violence and rape, but until we bring up the rate of prosecutions, trafficking will still be a business that is, for want of a better phrase, worthwhile.
And now let's finally just bring this back to the children, the kids who are trafficked. It's taken you years to come to terms with your experience, and I imagine you're still working on that now. Can you heal these kids who've been trafficked?
When a child is so severely abused, it's damaging, psychologically, it's damaging for a lifetime. I mean, what we don't realize when we're using child slaves, such as in my case, it's devastation. My mind and my body shut down. I was scared, I was crying, nobody was there to help me. And I was moved from place to place, as well as being abused. So any of that trauma is going to take a hold on the child. And it's very difficult for that child to recover. What I say is what the traffickers did to me was a lifetime crime. But on the other hand, when we look at the prosecution, why is it low? Yet for the traffickers to go and get away with 2 to 5 years is not enough. We need to increase the penalties on these traffickers.
Rani, Colin, thank you very much. Catching the perpetrators of trafficking is proving very difficult. Conviction rates have got worse over the past years. We've figures for the EU in 2010, and there are only 1,250 convictions. It's now hoped that concerted action will help combat this crime, but for that to happen, it takes more than lip service from EU members, but true resolve and commitment to implement the laws to fight it. That's all for On the Frontline, but our debate continues on social media. I look forward to hearing your thoughts.